The heels of my shoes hammered the floor of the Suffolk County Courthouse, a sharp sound in the drizzling Boston night, at the Whitlock dinner table, long ago. My stepmother slapped me. I was 23 years old, an adult, and my brother just laughed. That should have been the end. It wasn't. My wealthy grandfather once called a secret family meeting, intending to give me something that would change everything. But the recording of that meeting disappeared the very same night. My name is Ava Merrick. I am 33 years old, and I am a forensic accountant at Harbor Point Forensics. My job is to find the story hidden in the numbers, to follow the decimal points that lead back to a crime. Today, the story is my own. The air inside the Suffolk County Courthouse is thick, tasting of old varnish, damp wool coats, and the stale coffee breath of 100 private anxieties. It is a Tuesday. The light struggling through the tall, arched windows is the color of weak tea, doing nothing to warm the cavernous chill of the marble hallway. My dark blue coat feels insufficient, a flimsy piece of fabric against the weight of the institution. I am here to file a civil suit against the Whitlocks. Not just any Whitlocks, my former family. The family of my mother's second husband. The family that absorbed my childhood and then spat me out. I clutch the thick stack of documents in my hands. The edges are sharp, biting into my palms. This sheaf of paper represents 2 years of my life, distilled into affidavits, exhibits, and financial timelines that read like a corporate autopsy. It details the systematic and deliberate theft of my inheritance, my labor, and my trust. The Whitlock assets are a quiet Boston legend, the kind of old money wealth that does not shout. It whispers from the brick facades of their rental complexes lining the North Shore, a portfolio of properties that survived the crash of 2008 only because of me. It relaxes in the sprawling cabin on Lake Sunapee in New Hampshire, a 6-bedroom monolith of glass and timber, where they spend August pretending to be rustic, and it breeds in the darkness of the Whitlock Family Trust, a legal fortress designed by 3 generations of lawyers to protect the Whitlock name from creditors, from taxes, and from inconvenient truths like me. We are in courtroom 3B, a preliminary motion session. It is not the main event, just the opening bell. But they are here. They had to be. My eyes find them instantly, in the 3rd row back, seated with the kind of proprietary calm as if she had personally endowed the mahogany bench, is Lydia Whitlock. Lydia, my stepmother, to the city of Boston. She is Saint Lydia, the chairwoman of the Children's Benefit Gala, the smiling face on the board of the symphony. Her silver blonde hair is coiled in a perfect, understated chignon. She wears a cream-colored cashmere suit that probably cost more than my first car. She is the picture of civic virtue, of old-world grace. As I watch, she inclines her head slightly, offering a brief, compassionate smile to her attorney. A man whose entire career is built on burying the mistakes of the wealthy. She does not look at me. Looking at me would require acknowledging me. And next to her, slouching, is Brent, my half-brother, 36 years old and perpetually bored. Brent is tapping, swiping, scrolling on his phone, a sliver of screen visible between his fingers. He probably assumes I am staring, and he is right. He lifts his head, his gaze slides over me, and the corner of his mouth pulls up. Not a smile, a smirk. It is the specific expression of a man who has never faced a single consequence he could not buy his way out of. He looks back down at his phone, dismissing me. My throat tightens. The blood rushes in my ears, hot and loud. I am not the trembling girl they remember. I am a professional. I build cases like this for a living. I dismantle lies. I force my hands to stop shaking, interlocking my fingers. I breathe in the smell of the courtroom, dust and disinfectant. I can feel the memory, the phantom sting of it, rising to the surface. It is always there, waiting. I am 23 years old, fresh from my master's program, back at the Whitlock dinner table. I had just presented a financial model, a way to restructure the debt on the North Shore properties, a way to save the company. My stepfather, Victor, was silent. studying his wine glass. Brent was smirking, that same damn smirk. And Lydia, after a long silence, had said, "That's very ambitious, dear, but perhaps you should leave the strategy to us." I had pushed back, gently, respectfully, but I had the data. "Lydia, the numbers don't lie. If you don't renegotiate this specific tranche of debt before the third quarter, the interest rates will trigger a covenant breach." "The numbers," she'd repeated, her voice soft, dangerous. "You always did like your little numbers." "It's not about liking them," I said, my voice rising slightly. "It's about the reality. The company is over-leveraged." "The company," she said, placing her napkin on the table, "is none of your concern. Ava, your concern is to be grateful you have a seat at this table at all. You seem to forget your place." "My place? My place is trying to stop this family from driving off a financial cliff." The crack of the slap was shockingly loud in the dining room. My head snapped to the side. The sting was immediate, a blossoming heat across my left cheek, but the slap was not the worst part. The worst part was the sound that followed. Brent laughed. It was not a small chuckle. It was a sharp, barking laugh of pure amusement. He found my humiliation hilarious. I looked at him, my cheek burning, my eyes watering with shock, and he was grinning, shaking his head as if I were the punchline to the world's funniest joke. Victor said nothing. He simply picked up his fork and signaled to the housekeeper for more bread. That was the moment the family broke, the moment I knew I was, and always had been, an outsider. "Ava?" I blink. The courtroom snaps back into focus. The memory recedes, leaving the familiar metallic taste of adrenaline in its wake. Cara Dominguez is at my elbow, my attorney. She is sharp, focused, and utterly unimpressed by the Whitlock dynasty. She's ex-DOJ, and she moves with a clipped efficiency that I deeply respect. She's not a family lawyer. She's a federal litigator. We are not here to argue over feelings. We are here to argue over fraud. "Ready?" she asks again, her voice low. I give her a single, sharp nod. I was ready 10 years ago. I was ready the day I signed the wire transfer authorization. The Whitlocks, and their lawyers, assume this lawsuit is a shakedown. They believe I am here, after all this time, for the money. And it was a lot of money. $470,000, my money. Money my own mother, before she died, before she ever met Victor Whitlock, had left to me. It was everything I had. When the recession hit, the Whitlock rental company was bleeding. Their aggressive expansion strategy, championed by Brent, had left them hopelessly exposed. The banks were calling in their loans. Victor was paralyzed, and Brent was blaming the market, the banks, the government, everyone but himself. I was the one who found the way out. I was the one who worked for 18 hours a day for 6 straight months, sleeping on a cot in the back office of their North Shore headquarters. I was the one who rebuilt their financial models from scratch. I was the one who flew to New York and convinced a secondary lender to restructure the debt, based on my models, and I was the one who plugged the final, critical hole in their cash flow. "We just need liquidity." "Ava," Victor had said, his hand on my shoulder, the picture of a desperate, loving stepfather. "Just enough to satisfy the bondholders for 6 months. By then, your plan will have worked. You'll be a partner, of course, full equity. $470,000. I signed it over, and my plan worked. The company stabilized. The rental income flowed. The crisis was averted. 3 months later, my keycard stopped working. My email account was deactivated. I was called into a meeting not with Victor, but with a junior HR representative and a lawyer I had never seen before. "The company is moving in a new direction," the HR woman read from a script. "We appreciate your contributions during the transition, but your temporary consulting role is no longer required." "Consulting role?" "But, Victor," I'd stammered. "The partnership, my investment." The lawyer slid a single piece of paper across the table, a non-disclosure agreement, paired with a check for $5,000, a generous severance for your time. There was no contract. There was no promissory note. There was only Victor's handshake and the word family. I never cashed the check, but I kept the wire transfer confirmations. I kept the emails. I kept the financial models I had built, the ones they were still using. I walked away and built my own life, my own career. I learned to spot the patterns of betrayal in spreadsheets and bank statements. I became an expert in fraud, and I waited. Now, standing in the cold courtroom, I look past Lydia's perfect hair and Brent's arrogant smirk. They think this is about the money. They think they can cut me another check, make me sign another NDA, and I will vanish. They are wrong. I am not here for the $470,000, though I will take it back. I am not here for the equity, though I will prove I earned it. I am here because 3 years ago, a package arrived at my door containing my grandfather's real will. I am here because the man who raised me, Harlan Merrick, my mother's father, saw this coming. He knew them. He knew what they were capable of. I am here for the truth. I am here to execute my grandfather's last wish, and the Whitlocks, in all their self-satisfied privilege, have no idea what is about to hit them. The memory of 2017 is all sharp edges and the color of a fluorescent light at 3 a.m. The market had not just frozen, it had seized. Credit lines evaporated. Development projects across Boston stalled. Skeletons of steel and concrete against a gray sky. The Whitlock portfolio was leveraged to the absolute hilt. I was living on caffeine and adrenaline. 18-hour days were the norm. I practically lived in that back office in the North Shore headquarters, the one with the buzzing overhead light and the window that faced a brick wall. My world shrank to the glow of 3 monitors, to spreadsheets that stretched into infinity, to cash flow projections and covenant negotiations. I was 23, and I was holding the entire Whitlock company together with numbers and sheer force of will. I found the Lifeline, a small private equity firm in New York that was hunting for distressed assets, but only if the underlying financials were sound. My models proved they were, or at least that they could be. All they needed was a bridge, a sign of good faith. My $470,000 was that bridge. The night I signed the transfer, I felt like a savior. I thought I had finally, undeniably, earned my place. 3 months later, the company was stable. The New York firm was in, the banks were satisfied, and the first new leases were being signed. Victor called for a council dinner, as he liked to call them, a formal affair at the Beacon Hill house. I walked in exhausted but proud. I expected a toast. I expected a thank you. Victor was standing by the fireplace, swirling a brandy. He looked grave. Lydia was on the sofa, her posture perfect, her expression neutral. Brent was leaning against the bar, already on his second scotch. "Ava, sit down," Victor said. He did not use his warm, stepfatherly voice. This was his chairman voice. I sat. The silence stretched. "The board," Victor began, "or the council, as we call it, has been reviewing the restructuring." "It's working," I said, a little too quickly. "The projections are holding. We're already ahead of the 5-month target." "We are," Victor agreed, nodding slowly. "But the way it was done has raised serious concerns. The level of operational manipulation required to restructure the debt. It's exposed us to significant future liabilities. The board feels blindsided." My mind raced. Operational manipulation? I just reallocated assets. I moved capital from the performing properties to cover the non-performing notes. It's standard portfolio management. You saw every wire. "What you call standard," Lydia said, her voice cutting through the air, cool and sharp as ice. "Others call reckless. You acted alone. You committed family assets without full consensus." "Family assets?" I was stunned. "My assets. It was my money that—" "A technicality," Victor waved his hand, dismissing my life savings. "The point is, the council feels your judgment is aggressive, impulsive. It's not the Whitlock way." I looked at Brent. He was just watching, that familiar smirk playing on his lips. He raised his glass in a mock toast. "I saved this company," I said. my voice low and shaking. "I saved everything." Lydia leaned forward, her pearls gleaming. "Ava, dear," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "you did a lot of work, but some people are born to lead, and some people are born to follow. There is no shame in being a follower. It is simply a matter of understanding one's place." The insult hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It was the slap, all over again, but this time in public, and aimed not at my face, but at my mind, my contribution, my entire worth. I looked from her, to Victor's calculated neutrality, and then to Brent. He was eating. He had picked up his dessert fork and was digging into a slice of cheesecake, thoroughly amused. The only sound in the room was the clink of his fork against the china. Then a pause, just a single beat of silence as he met my gaze, and then the clinking resumed. He did not have to laugh. The silence, the fork, the smirk. It was louder. I stood up. My chair scraped against the hardwood floor. "Ava," Victor started, holding up a hand. "We are not finished." "Yes," I said. "We are." I walked out of the dining room. I walked up the grand staircase to my old room. I did not pack a suitcase. I did not take the clothes in the closet or the books on the shelf. I opened my desk drawer, took my checkbook, and the file folder containing the original bank statements, the wire transfer confirmations, the proof. I walked out of that house and never slept there again. I built my life. I got my certifications. I bought a small, cluttered attic apartment in the South End. I became Ava Merrick, forensic accountant. And then, 3 years ago, on a rainy November afternoon, the package arrived. It was a simple gray cardboard mailer, no return address, just my name and address, printed by a label maker. I slid it open with a kitchen knife, expecting a tax document or a piece of evidence for a case. It was not. Inside, there was a single, folded piece of thick, cream-colored stationery. It was my grandfather's stationery, Harlan Merrick's, and it was his handwriting, that familiar, strong, left-slanting cursive. It was not a long note. It said, "My dearest Ava, if you are reading this, I am gone, and they have done what I feared. Do not believe what they tell you. Do not believe what they show you. My full will, the true one, is with Elliot Crane. He holds it in trust. This is a copy of my intent. Everything that came from my side, everything that is Merrick, not Whitlock. It is yours. The properties, the original accounts, the legacy. It belongs to you, and only you. They were to be stewards, not owners. Your mother would have wanted it. I am so proud of the woman you have become. Do not let them take this from you." My hands were trembling so badly I could barely read the signature. Harlan. I sank onto my sofa. My grandfather had been dead for 2 years at that point. The probate was long since closed. I had been there. I had listened as the lawyers read the will. I had listened as the bulk of the estate, including the properties and assets that had belonged to my mother's family, the Merrick assets, which Victor had merged with his own after her death, was officially transferred to Brent. As the continuing legacy of the family name, I was given a one-time educational trust dispersal of $50,000. I ran to my computer. I still had the digital copies of the probated documents. I pulled up the official will, the one filed with the court, and I pulled up the note from my grandfather. I opened my forensic toolkit. I scanned both signatures at high resolution. I overlaid them. My blood went cold. The signature on the official will, the one that gave everything to Brent, was flawless. It was a perfect, beautiful Harlan Merrick. Too perfect. I dug through my old digital archives, through scanned letters, birthday cards, and old bank authorizations. I found it, a property transfer document from 2002. My grandfather had co-signed on my mother's first apartment. I scanned the 2002 signature. I overlaid it with the signature from the probated will. They were identical, not similar, not close, identical, pixel for pixel, the stroke weight, the angle, the tiny, almost imperceptible feathering at the end of the K. You cannot sign your name the exact same way twice. It is a biometric impossibility. One was a forgery, traced or digitally lifted from a 2-decade-old document. My grandfather's real signature, the one on the note he had written to me, it was shakier, angrier. The M in Merrick was harder, more defined. It was the signature of an old man, writing with purpose. It was real. The loophole, it hit me like a physical blow. When Harlan died, the electronic registry for wills was still in its infancy. It was not mandatory. It was all too easy for an executor, Victor, to find an old will, or forge a new one, and file it quietly, counting on the fact that no one would contest it, especially not the granddaughter who had already been publicly disowned. They had not just stolen my money. They had not just slapped me and laughed at me. They had stolen my grandfather's last words. They had erased him. I sat in my attic apartment, the gray light of Boston fading outside. The anger was a cold, clean fire. They thought I was a broken girl. They thought I was a follower. They had forgotten what I do for a living. I am Ava Merrick. I am a forensic accountant, and I had just opened the most important case of my life. Elliot Crane was a name in a file, a footnote in my grandfather's life. He had been Harlan's paralegal for 30 years, a man who allegedly knew where every document was, where every penny was buried. My grandfather's note said, "Elliot Crane holds it in trust." He was retired. I found him living in a small, neat bungalow in Revere, near the water. When I called him, his voice was thin as paper, but he agreed to meet. We met at a Formica table diner off the highway, the kind of place that smells of old coffee and frying oil. Elliot Crane was smaller than I expected. His hands, wrapped around a white ceramic mug, trembled with a constant, fine tremor. But his eyes, when he looked up at me, were perfectly sharp. They were blue and assessing. He knew exactly who I was. "You look like your mother," he said, his voice barely a whisper above the diner's clatter. "Mr. Crane?" I started. "My grandfather, Harlan, left me a note. He said you—" I know what he said. He looked around, his gaze darting to the waitress, to the door. He was terrified. I held it, for 2 years, after he died. I held it, but they came to me. "Who came? Victor?" He flinched. "Harlan's lawyer, McGregor, a good man. He was the one who drafted the real will, the one Harlan signed. But Victor found out." He slid his trembling hand across the table, pressing a small, silver USB drive into my palm. His skin was cold. "What is this?" "McGregor is dead. Ms. Merrick, you know that, right? A car accident, just 6 months after your grandfather passed. Drunk driver. They said, McGregor never drank." His eyes held mine. "He was scared. In the last weeks, he started keeping an audio diary. He gave me a copy, in case anything happened. This is it. This is what I have in trust. It's not the will. It's the story of the will." I curled my fingers around the drive. "Get out of here," he whispered. "Don't contact me again. I've done my part. Harlan was a good man. He didn't deserve this." He dropped a $5 bill on the table and walked out, his steps shuffling but quick. I did not listen to it in the car. I drove back to my office at Harbor Point, locked the door, bypassed the main server, and plugged the drive directly into my secure workstation. I put on my best noise-canceling headphones. The file was a simple audio log, a man's voice, educated, but strained, whispering into what sounded like a cheap microphone. Entry: October 10th. Victor Whitlock was here again. He insists Harlan lacked capacity. He is demanding I produce the previous will, the one from 2002. I refused. Entry: October 12th. He threatened me. He threatened my family. He said he knows where my daughter goes to school. He wants me to find the old will and file that one, to destroy the new one. He said Harlan is dying. No one will know the difference. The lawyer's voice cracked. Entry: October 14th. I cannot do it. I will not. I have told Elliot Crane to hold a copy, but God help me, I am afraid. And then, the last entry? He brought a new document, a forgery. It's a perfect copy of the 2002 signature. He must have lifted it. He is forcing me to file it upon Harlan's death. He says I will be the executor, and I will manage the probate. My car's brakes felt soft today. I am so sorry. Harlan. The file ended. I sat in the humming silence of my office. This changed everything. This was not just fraud. This was duress, coercion, and a death that was almost certainly not an accident. My first move was professional paranoia. This USB was now the most dangerous thing I owned. I initiated my 3-tier backup protocol. 1. I copied the files to an AES-256 encrypted portable solid-state drive. I drove to my bank and placed it in my safe deposit box. 2. I made a second copy on another encrypted drive, which I kept in my personal safe, separate from the case files. 3. I made a third copy, sealed it in an anti-static bag, and mailed it via bonded courier to my best friend, Naomi Park, in Chicago. Naomi is a software engineer. She is smart, she is not family, and she had standing instructions. If you do not hear from me for 72 hours, open this and give it to the U.S. Attorney's Office. With the evidence secured, I went to work on the forgery. The digital overlay had been my first guess. McGregor's diary confirmed it. Now, I needed to prove it scientifically. I scanned the probated will's signature at 1200 dpi. Isolating it, I scanned the signature from the 2002 property deed. Under microscopic analysis, they were not just similar, they were congruent. The ink dispersion patterns, the pen lifts, the exact angle of the K, but the real proof was in the note Harlan had sent me. I scanned his signature from that note. The comparison was damning. The authentic signature, the one from the note, showed a high-frequency kinetic tremor, microscopic variations in the line, consistent with a man of his age. Writing with intent, the forged signature was smooth, flawless, and utterly devoid of life. It was a digital copy, printed onto the will. Now, I followed the money. A forged will is useless if you do not move the assets. I spent the next 48 hours buried in public databases, cross-referencing state corporate filings with county property records. I found them. 3 new special purpose vehicles, or SPVs, all registered in Delaware. Their names were bland: North Shore Urban Partners, Merrick Legacy Holdings, and Beacon Hill Capital Ventures. All 3 were filed within 4 days of Harlan's death. All 3 listed their sole managing director as Victor Whitlock. I watched, line by line, as the digital records showed the assets from my mother's family, the apartment buildings, the New Hampshire property, the brokerage accounts, transferring out of Harlan's estate and into these anonymous shell companies. They were washing my inheritance, moving it, and hiding it in plain sight, all under the legal cover of a fraudulent will. I had the digital and the financial. I needed the human. I found Mrs. Doyle, the Whitlock's former housekeeper, living in a small, clean apartment in Dorchester. She had worked for Harlan for 20 years, long before Lydia and Victor. She was loyal to him, not to them. She was nervous, wringing her hands, but she let me in. Miss Ava, my goodness, you look so strong. Mrs. Doyle, I said, keeping my voice gentle, I need your help. I am looking into my grandfather's will. Her face closed. I don't know anything about that. I am not asking what you know. I am asking what you saw. I took a breath. McGregor's audio diary mentioned it. My grandfather's note mentioned it. There was another will, one he signed just before he died. Her eyes filled with tears. He was so worried, she whispered. That last month, Mr. Victor and Mr. Brent, always yelling, always in the study. Did you see him sign anything, Mrs. Doyle? Think, in the study. She nodded, closing her eyes. Yes, it was about a week before he passed. Mr. McGregor was there. He looked sick. Mr. Harlan, He was weak, but his voice was strong. He signed a big stack of papers, a blue cover. And when Mr. McGregor left, Mr. Harlan called me in. He pointed to the papers. He said, "Doyle, you see these? You are my witness. This is Ava's part. This is to make sure she is safe, no matter what they say." He looked right at me. He made me promise I'd remember. "Did you ever see those papers again?" She shook her head. "After he passed, Mr. Victor cleaned out the study. He changed the locks. I never saw them again." This was it. Her testimony shattered the timeline of the forged will. I looked around her apartment, a place filled with small trinkets. On her mantel was an old, framed photograph of the Beacon Hill house staff at Christmas. In the background, hanging on the study wall, was my grandfather's favorite painting, a large oil of a sailboat on rough seas. In the photo, the painting was crooked. I stared at it. "Mrs. Doyle, that painting, did it always hang crooked like that?" She squinted. "Oh, that thing. No, Mr. Harlan was always fiddling with it. Said the frame was loose, always straightening it." My heart was hammering, fiddling with it. I knew that study. I knew that wall. It was reinforced. My grandfather had not been straightening it. He had been opening it. There was a wall safe. I had the motive. I had the means. I had the witness. And now, I had the location. I left Mrs. Doyle's apartment and called Cara Dominguez. "Cara," I said, my voice perfectly steady, "we need to meet. Now. This is no longer a civil suit for $470,000. This is criminal. I have evidence of will forgery, witness tampering, and coercion, and I know where the real evidence is hidden." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Ava, you had better be 100% sure." "I am a forensic accountant," I said. "I am always sure. We are not just filing a motion. We are petitioning for a search warrant." That night, my personal cell phone rang, a blocked number. I hit the record button on my computer's audio interface before I answered. "Hello?" Silence. Then, a voice. It was digitally distorted. A low, mechanical growl. "You're a lot like your mother. You don't know when to stop." My blood turned to ice. "Stop digging up the dead," the voice rasped. "Some things are buried for a reason." The line clicked. I saved the file. Threat 1, WAV. They were scared. Good. The text message from Brent arrived at 6:30 p.m. It was aggressively casual. "Sunapee, Granite Lodge, 8 o'clock. No, please. No, we need to talk." Just a summons. Sunapee, their territory. The massive, dark-timbered lodge overlooking the lake. The place where the Whitlock Council made its decisions. This was not a negotiation. It was an ambush. My hand was steady as I replied with a single K. The threat call had been 48 hours ago. I had spent that time sleeping with a wedge under my apartment door and my phone analyzing the waveform of the distorted voice. It was a standard modulation filter, but the underlying speech pattern was male, with a slight North Shore accent. It was amateur. This text from Brent was the follow-up. The anonymous call was the stick. This meeting would be the carrot. I backed up the audio file of the threat one last time, uploading the encrypted container to a Swiss server, before grabbing my keys. I found my digital audio recorder, the one I used for client interviews. It was the size of a credit card, wafer-thin, with a 12-hour battery life. I slipped it into the breast pocket of my jacket, tested the microphone against the fabric, a clear, sharp sound, and activated it. I would not turn it off until I was back in my car. The drive to New Hampshire was dark. The highway gave way to winding, two-lane roads that cut through dense pine forests. The trees crowded the asphalt. Swallowing my headlights, I drove my boring, reliable sedan, the one that blended in everywhere. I felt the familiar, cold click in my brain, the space I went to during an audit. This was not a family reunion. This was a deposition. Granite Lodge was set back from the road, at the end of a long, winding driveway. It was meant to look rustic, but it was a fortress of wealth. As I pulled up, the lodge was blazing with light, every multi-paned window glowing a warm, deceptive yellow. The light spilled out onto the dark, choppy water of Lake Sunapee, the reflections shattering and reforming. I got out of the car. The air was cold, smelling of pine and wet stone. I walked up the heavy granite steps, my footsteps echoing. The front door was unlocked. They were in the great room. A fire roared in the walk-in stone fireplace. The room smelled of expensive leather and old wood. Lydia was seated on a sofa, immaculate, posture perfect. She was wearing her pearls, a simple string that I knew had cost more than my college education. They glowed against her black cashmere sweater. Victor stood by the fire, his back to me, staring into the flames. He was wearing the watch. My stomach clenched. It was a vintage Patek Philippe, a specific, rare model. It had been my grandfather Harlan's. Victor, who had never met my grandfather until he married my mother, was wearing his watch. Brent was at the bar, pouring 3 glasses of red wine. He looked over, the picture of the casual, welcoming host. "Ava, glad you could make it. Wine?" "No, thank you." "Right. Always working," he said, with his trademark smirk. He handed a glass to his mother and one to his father. He kept the third for himself. They had not poured one for me. "You wanted to see me," I said. I remained standing in the center of the room, my jacket still on. I wanted my stance to be clear. I was not here to stay. Victor turned. His face was arranged in lines of paternal concern, a look he had perfected. "Ava, thank you for coming. We've been worried." "You have?" "This lawsuit," he said, gesturing vaguely. "It's so aggressive. It's not you. We were shocked. We just want to talk, to understand what it is you really want." I said nothing. I let the silence stretch, a tactic I had learned from my best interrogators. The first one to fill the silence loses. Lydia, impatient, set her wineglass down. "What Victor means, Ava, is that we are prepared to be generous. We know you've had difficulties. We want to help." She slid a document across the coffee table, a thick, cream-colored sheaf of paper, held by a brass clip. I did not move to take it. "What is it?" "It's an arrangement," Victor said, stepping forward. "A way to put all this ugliness behind us. We are prepared to offer you a lifetime stipend, a significant one, enough to live very, very comfortably." "A stipend," I repeated. "In exchange," Lydia added, her voice smooth, "for a full waiver of all claims. You sign it, you drop this, unpleasantness, and we take care of you, for life. You would be family again." I looked at the paper. Waiver of all claims and rights of inheritance. They knew. They knew I was looking for the will. The anonymous threat had failed. So here was the 7-figure bribe. "My claim," I said, my voice quiet, "is not just about the money I invested. It's about the will, the one my grandfather actually signed." Victor stiffened. Lydia's painted smile did not move, but her eyes went flat. "Ava," Victor said, his voice hardening, "your grandfather's will was probated. It was settled. You were there." "I have reason to believe the probated will was a forgery," I said. "I have questions about Mr. McGregor, about his death." The room went absolutely still. The only sound was the crackle of the fire. Brent, who had been swirling his wine, let out a short, sharp laugh. "McGregor? God, are you still on that? That old fool? Dad already handled that lawyer." My heart stopped, then hammered against my ribs. The recorder in my pocket felt like it was burning a hole through my chest. I kept my face blank, my gaze locked on Brent. Victor's head snapped toward his son. "Brent," he hissed. "What?" Brent shrugged, oblivious, arrogant. "It's true. He was a problem, and you dealt with it, just like we're dealing with this." "I have you." The words screamed in my head. "I have you." Lydia saw the shift. She saw that Brent had made a fatal error, and she moved instantly to contain it. Her tactic was not denial. It was destruction. "Ava, dear," she said, her voice softening, becoming thick with a terrible, false sympathy. She stood up and walked toward me, her hands clasped. "We need to be honest. We remember that time you were working for us. Those long hours. You were under so much strain." I did not move. "You were barely sleeping," she continued, tilting her head. "You became erratic. You were making accusations. You were emotional, paranoid. We were all terribly worried about your mental stability, weren't we, Victor?" "We were," Victor said, catching her cue, "deeply concerned. This talk of forgeries, of lawyers. Ava, this sounds like that same instability. Are you sure you are well? Are you sure you are remembering these things correctly?" It was brilliant. It was vicious. They were not just denying the crime. They were destroying the witness. They were building the narrative that I was an unstable, vengeful, hysterical woman. The Concerned Mother Act was a blade designed to sever my credibility. I looked at her, at the pearls, at the cold, calculating eyes. "I am perfectly stable, Lydia," I said. My voice was as cold as the lake outside. "And I am remembering everything. I know what you did. I know what Victor did. And now, thanks to Brent, I know you handled Mr. McGregor." Lydia's mask of concern vanished. Her face went white with rage. "You ungrateful little—" "I will not be signing your offer," I said, cutting her off. I turned and walked to the door. "Ava!" Victor's voice was a command. "You cannot just walk away. You are making a terrible mistake." "No," I said, my hand on the heavy iron latch. "The mistake was yours. You thought I was stupid. You thought I was weak. You thought that because my brother laughed when you hit me, I would just disappear." I pulled the door open and walked out into the freezing night. I did not run to my car. I walked, I measured my steps, I got in, locked the doors, and sat for a moment, my hands shaking, not with fear, but with a pure, distilled adrenaline. I took the recorder from my pocket. The red light was still blinking. I put the car in reverse. As my headlights swung around, they illuminated the edge of the woods, just past the driveway entrance. For a fraction of a second, I saw it, a dark SUV, parked deep in the shadows. As my lights hit it, its own headlights flashed on, then snapped off instantly. My blood went cold. They were not just letting me leave. They were watching me. They were following me. I drove. I did not speed. I drove the speed limit, my eyes glued to the rearview mirror. The SUV did not follow. They were professionals. They would have another car pick me up on the main road, or they were just making a point. "We see you. We are everywhere." I did not drive home. I drove to a 24-hour diner in Somerville and sat in a back booth, my back to the wall, and drank 3 cups of black coffee. I uploaded the audio file from the lodge to my Swiss server, Brent Confession, Wave. At 2 a.m, my phone rang. It was Elliot Crane. "Ava?" His voice was a reedy whisper, cracking with terror. "Elliot, what's wrong?" "They came by, Ava. They came to my house. 2 men. They didn't touch me. They stood in my living room. They told me I should be careful. That old men can fall. That I had a nice, quiet life, and I should keep it that way. A reminder, they called it." He was crying, a soft, terrified sobbing. "Go to your daughter's house, Elliot," I said, my voice hard. "Go right now. Pack a bag, and go. Do not tell anyone else where you are." "This is too big, Ava. They're monsters." "Yes," I said. "They are, but they're sloppy. Go. I'll handle this." I hung up. The Whitlocks were no longer just committing financial crimes. They were threatening witnesses. They were intimidating the elderly. They were operating like a criminal enterprise. And I was going to treat them like one. I went home. The first thing I did was call a 24-hour locksmith and security firm. By sunrise, my apartment had new steel core doors, new deadbolts, and a 3-camera, closed-loop security system. I paid in cash. At 9 a.m., I was in Cara Dominguez's office. "They're escalating," I said, and played her the audio from the lodge. Kara listened, her face impassive, but her knuckles were white. When Brent's voice filled the room, Dad already handled that lawyer. Her eyes widened. She listened to the rest. This is a confession, Ava," she said. "And this," I said, playing the file. Threat 1, wave, the distorted voice. "And this," I said, detailing the SUV and Elliot Crane's call. Kara stood up and walked to the window. "This just left my pay grade. This is no longer just a civil case about a will. This is conspiracy. This is coercion of a witness. This is RICO territory. This is federal." "I know," I said. "That's why we're bringing in someone else." "Who?" "Her name is Maya Gold. She's a civil rights attorney, but her specialty is criminal conspiracy. She sues corrupt police departments. She goes after organized crime. She's not afraid of monsters." Kara looked at me. "Ava, this is the point of no return. We go this route, and it's not about money anymore. It's about prison." "It was never about the money, Kara," I said. "It's about the truth. It's about my grandfather. It's about that laugh." I picked up my phone. "Let's call Maya." Kara nodded, her expression hardening into a look of grim determination. "All right, let's prepare for the federal level." "Good," I said. "I want to take this all the way." The warrant was signed by a federal magistrate at 4:30 in the morning. At 5:15 a.m., the air in Beacon Hill was cold, still, and pitch black, the gas lamps casting weak, yellow circles on the cobblestones. I stood back on the sidewalk, my blue coat pulled tight, standing with Kara and Maya. We were not the ones at the door. That honor belonged to a team of 6 federal agents from the Financial Crimes Division. They were quiet, professional, and wore navy blue windbreakers with yellow lettering. One of them, the lead agent, knocked. It was not a polite tap. It was a hard official rap that echoed on the quiet, historic street. Knock, knock, knock. We waited. A light flicked on in an upstairs window, then another. Footsteps descended the grand staircase. The heavy brass locks turned, one by one. The door opened. Victor Whitlock stood there in a silk dressing gown, his gray hair mussed from sleep. He squinted into the dark, his eyes adjusting, trying to process the official badges held up to his face, and in that moment, under the harsh glare of the agent's flashlights, he looked exactly what he was, not a titan of industry, not a powerful patriarch. He just looked old, small and tired, and old. "Victor Whitlock," the lead agent said, his voice flat. "We have a federal warrant to search these premises in connection with an investigation into wire fraud, mail fraud, and witness tampering." Victor's mouth opened and closed. He looked past them, his gaze finding me on the sidewalk. His expression was not anger, it was a deep, hollow shock, the look of a man who had just run out of road. "You," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Step aside, sir." The agents moved past him. I walked in, followed by Kara. This was the first time I had set foot in this house since the night I was functionally disowned. It smelled the same: lemon oil, old money, and something cold. Lydia was standing at the top of the grand staircase, halfway down. She was illuminated by the chandelier above her, which the agents had switched on. She, unlike Victor, was not in her dressing gown. She was fully dressed in black slacks and a gray cashmere sweater. Her hair was pulled back. She had been expecting this, or at least, expecting something. Her face was a perfect pale mask of calm. She did not look at me. She watched the agents fanning out, her expression one of mild, aristocratic offense, as if they were tradesmen who had tracked mud on her rug. But her hands, resting on the polished banister, told the truth. Her knuckles were white. She was gripping the wood so hard. Her fingers looked like claws. "The study," I said, my voice loud in the marble entryway. The lead agent nodded. I led the way, past the formal dining room, past the sitting room, and to the heavy oak door of Harlan's, now Victor's, study. It was exactly as I remembered. The leather-bound books, the heavy desk, the smell of pipe tobacco and old paper that never quite left the curtains. And on the far wall, the painting, the large oil of the sailboat, listing in a storm. "There," I said, pointing. The agents looked at the painting, then at me. "Mrs. Whitlock," the lead agent called, his voice booming. "We need you in here. We have reason to believe there is a wall safe behind this painting, and we need the code." Lydia descended the stairs, her steps measured. She entered the study, her gaze finally landing on me. It was pure, distilled the hatred. "I have no idea what she's talking about. This is harassment." "We can get a drill, ma'am," the agent said, unimpressed. "It will damage the wall, or you can provide the code." Victor stumbled in, looking dazed. "A safe? What safe?" He genuinely did not know. My grandfather had been smarter than I even imagined. I stepped forward. "I know the code." Lydia's head snapped toward me. The mask cracked. For a fraction of a second, I saw it. Pure panic. I looked at the agents. They taught me how to open it when I was a child. My grandfather said it was in case of a fire. He said it held all our important memories. I walked to the painting. I lifted it from its hook. It was heavy, but I was strong. I set it on the floor, revealing the dull gray metal square of a keypad safe, flush with the wall. I stood in front of it. My fingers hovered over the keys. "It's the most important date in the world, Ava." Harlan's voice, a memory. "The day you arrived." I typed in the numbers, 14/05/1992, May 14th, 1992. My birthday. There was a soft beep, a mechanical whir, and a heavy clack. The lock disengaged. The safe door clicked open. Lydia let out a small sound, a tiny, strangled gasp. I pulled the door open. The agents were on me in a second with flashlights and evidence bags. It was not full, but what it held was everything. First, there was a worn, leather-bound journal. I recognized it. It was Harlan's, the one he kept on his desk every day. I opened it. His strong, left-slanting cursive filled the pages. It was not a daily diary. It was a ledger of his life and his fears. Second, a simple white envelope, sealed. My name was on the front. Ava, just Ava. My hand trembled as I handed it to Kara. "Personal effects," Kara said to the agent. "We'll open it in front of her." She slid it open. It was a letter, 2 pages, handwritten. "My dearest Ava," I read aloud, my voice shaking. "If you are reading this, the worst has happened. They have chosen greed, but I knew this day might come. This journal is my record, but the truth? The truth is on the card. Do not let them say I did not know my own mind. You were the only one who ever saw the real business. You are the only one I trust to carry it on. This is not a gift. It is a responsibility. Your integrity is the key. Use it." My eyes blurred. "The card," I whispered, looking back into the safe. Tucked in the back, in a small plastic case, was a single, black SD memory card. The agent bagged it. "We'll need a reader." "Don't bother," I said. "I know what it is." I pointed to the high-end audio receiver in the study's built-in bookshelf. My grandfather loved music. He was also paranoid. That system has an SD slot. He recorded everything in this room. No, not everything. "The Shoreline Club," I said, the pieces clicking into place. "The family meeting. He must have had a recorder in his pocket. He brought the card home and put it in the safe." An agent took the card, walked to the stereo, and inserted it. Kara looked at me. I nodded. He pressed play. The file loaded, and then my grandfather's voice filled the room, clear, strong, and angry. "And I will say this only once, so I suggest you listen." Harlan's voice echoed, ghostly, from the speakers. "This merger was a mistake. Your operations are sloppy, Victor, and your son is a liability." "Father," Victor's voice, sycophantic, worried. "Do not call me that. We are here to discuss my legacy, the Merrick assets. You will manage them. You will be stewards. but you will not own them. They will be held in trust. In trust for who? That was Lydia's voice. Sharp. For Ava, Harlan said. The word hit the room like a gunshot. She is the heir. She is the only one with the head for it. But there is a condition. What condition? Victor, again. She must prove her integrity. She must demonstrate, in the face of your influence, that she is better than you. If she comes forward, if she proves herself, if she values the truth of the legacy over the comfort of a lie, it is all hers. If she fails, then you can have it. You can pick the bones. But I am betting on her. I am betting on my blood. A pause, then Brent's voice, dripping with sarcasm. So we just... What? We just wait for her to be a hero? That's insane. The trust is ironclad, Harlan's voice finished. And this recording, along with my journal, is the key. Now, this meeting is over. The file ended. Silence. Lydia Whitlock was staring at the speaker, her face as white as her pearls. Victor was leaning against the desk, his hands braced, as if he might fall. Well, Kara said, her voice crisp, that seems clear. The agents were not finished. The safe held more. Documents, an agent said, pulling out a thick manila folder. Kara and I fell upon it. My heart was pounding. It was not the real will. It was the paper trail. It was the SPV documents, the originals, the ones Victor had used to move the assets after Harlan's death. Look, I said, my finger tracing the lines. North Shore Urban Partners. That's the shell. He's moving the assets from the estate to Merrick Legacy Holdings, then to North Shore. It's a circular transfer. He's washing it. And tucked into the back of the folder, bank statements, a corporate account for North Shore Urban Partners, and a series of withdrawals. Consulting fees, I read, 100,000, 50,000, 200,000, all paid out to a holding company. I know that company, I whispered. Brent's, that's the one he uses for his development projects. The dates, they were perfect. The day after each asset transferred into the shell. A consulting fee transferred out to Brent. They were not just hiding the assets. They were liquidating them. They were stealing my grandfather's legacy, one piece at a time. And this, the lead agent said, holding up a plastic bag. He had found one last thing at the bottom of the safe, a stack of photographs. I took the bag. They were old family photos. Christmas at Sunapee. Easter brunch in this very house. So what? Victor croaked, finding his voice. They're just photos. No, I said, turning one over. They're not. My grandfather's hand, again, on the back of every photo. He had written the date, the time, and who was present. I pulled one out. This one, I said, holding it up. Shoreline Club, October 10th, the night of the meeting. Kara looked at me, confused. But, in Victor's testimony, I said, my voice ringing with clarity, in the original probate hearing, he stated he was alone with Harlan all of that week. He stated Harlan was confused and distraught and wanted to change his will back, but this photo, it shows everyone, Victor, Lydia, Brent, all there, all smiling. I held it up. This proves he lied under oath. This proves perjury. It was all here, the journal, the letter, the audio confession from my grandfather, the financial trail of the theft, the proof of perjury. It was a complete case, tied with a bow, left for me in a dark safe, waiting for the one person who knew the code. Kara looked at the lead agent. She was smiling, not a happy smile, a predator's smile. Bag it, she said. Bag all of it. We're sealing the evidence. As the agents labeled and sealed the leather journal, the letter, the SD card, and the stacks of documents, Kara pulled me aside. This is it, Ava. This is everything. This is beyond a civil suit. This is a criminal enterprise. I know, I said. Lydia and Victor will be arrested. Today, she said. And Brent, this evidence is enough for the U.S. attorney to move immediately, which means we need to get out in front of it. The Whitlock lawyers will try to spin this, to paint you as the villain. Let them, I said, feeling a decade of weight lift from my shoulders. No, Kara said. We don't let them. We end them. I'm calling the regional DOJ office. We're holding a press conference. Today, we are going to tell the world, in excruciating detail, exactly what they did. The press conference was a blur of flashbulbs and microphones. It was held on the steps of the federal courthouse, a place that felt more and more like my second home. I stood to the side, slightly behind Kara and Maya, and next to a grim-faced assistant U.S. attorney. He was the one who did most of the talking. He was all legal precision. He announced the arrests of Victor and Lydia Whitlock and of Brent Whitlock, pending a grand jury indictment. He listed the potential charges: conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud, obstruction of justice, coercion of a witness, and perjury. He spoke of a complex scheme to defraud a legitimate heir and the systematic abuse of the probate court system. The questions came in a chaotic volley. Is the heir here, Ms. Merrick? Ava, is it true you were fired from the company? How much money are we talking about? I said nothing. Kara had instructed me. Today, we let the law speak. You are the victim, not the defendant. You don't say a word. I just stood there, my hands clasped, and let them take my picture. The backlash was immediate and brutal. The Whitlock PR machine, funded by decades of goodwill and millions in charitable donations, roared to life. By the next morning, my face was on the cover of 2 local tabloids. The headlines were vicious. The gold digger, bitter stepdaughter, tries to jail saintly matriarch. Lydia's tragedy. We just wanted to help her. They had dredged up the old narrative. Anonymous family friends were quoted, describing me as erratic, emotional, and unstable after a breakdown. They painted Lydia as a philanthropic saint, a woman who had opened her heart and her home only to be betrayed. They painted me as a greedy, vindictive creature, crawling out of the shadows to destroy a good family. The story was compelling. It was simple. It was the story Lydia and Brent had been seeding for a decade, for a few days. The public tide was overwhelmingly against me. I turned off my phone, stopped reading the news. It's just noise, Ava, Kara said, her voice tight with anger. They're throwing mud, hoping some of it sticks. We stick to the facts. Then the first surprise landed. The noise had an unintended consequence. It had shaken loose people who had, until now, been too afraid to speak. Kara got a call from a lawyer representing 3 former employees of the Whitlock Group, all from the 2017 era, a bookkeeper, a project manager, and Victor's own executive assistant. They had all left the company shortly after I was forced out, and they had all kept copies of their files. They came forward, together, with sworn affidavits. They brought internal memorandums, memos I had never seen, memos that Victor had ordered deep-sixed. The bookkeeper produced a ledger entry, my $470,000 wire transfer. It was not coded as a loan. It was coded as capital contribution. A. Merrick, pending equity. The project manager had the original project files for the North Shore restructuring, the ones my models were based on. His memo to Victor stated, "Per Ava's restructuring, we are now cash flow positive. This is a brilliant turnaround." And the executive assistant, she had the minutes of a meeting I was not invited to. The minutes read, VW and BW to handle separation of A. Merrick, offer $5,000 severance, reclassify capital contribution as consulting fee, file NDA. It was the conspiracy, in writing. The second surprise came from the Whitlock's own lawyers. In a desperate attempt to regain control, they filed an emergency motion to have the journal and the letter found in the safe thrown out, claiming they were obvious fabrications created by a desperate plaintiff. They claimed my grandfather's signature was forged. By me. Arrogant, Kara muttered, reading the motion. And stupid. She had anticipated this, the day after the raid. She had sent Harlan's journal, his letter to me, and the forged 2002 will to the best independent, court-appointed forensic document examiner in New England. His report came back a day later. It was 12 pages long and utterly devastating. The signatures on the journal and the letter were unquestionably authentic, matching over 50 known exemplars of Harlan's signature. They showed the kinetic tremor, the pen pressure, and the idiosyncratic letter formations of the deceased. The probated will, the one that gave everything to Brent, the report was scathing. A high-quality digital reproduction, it is a non-dynamic signature, lacking all evidence of natural writing. It is a forgery. The judge, a formidable, no-nonsense woman named Judge Maria Estevez, unsealed the examiner's report and attached it to the public case file. The media narrative began to pivot. The third surprise was a digital bomb. While the federal investigators were doing discovery on the Whitlock servers they had seized, they found a buried email. It was in Brent's deleted items folder, from 2 weeks after I was fired. He had sent it from his personal email to a journalist he knew at the Boston Herald. The subject line, off-the-record info. The email was short. Hey Mark, that Whitlock story we discussed, you might want to look into the stepdaughter, Ava Merrick. Heard from a good source she had a full-blown mental breakdown after the market crash. Totally unstable. We're all just trying to protect her. But she's a lot. Sad stuff. Maybe your family insider column? It was the seed, the origin of the lie, the exact narrative Lydia had tried to use on me at the lodge. It was premeditated character assassination. With the affidavits, the forensics report, and Brent's email now part of the official record, the Whitlock legal team was bleeding. They filed an emergency motion for a stay, a delay, citing Lydia's frail health and contributions to the city and the media circus that was preventing a fair trial. Judge Estevez's denial came back in under an hour. It was 1 page long. She denied the motion flatly, and she added a line that would echo in every newspaper the next day. Given the volume of credible, corroborated evidence suggesting a conspiracy of financial elder abuse against the deceased, Harlan Merrick, this court finds that a speedy trial is in the paramount interest of justice. Elder abuse. The term was toxic. It shattered Lydia's saintly image. The tide of public opinion did not just turn, it became a tidal wave. That evening, I got a call from Elliot Crane. He was in protective custody, staying with his daughter in Vermont. His voice was no longer thin and reedy. It was strong. Ava, he said, I found it. Found what, Elliot? When I was packing, I grabbed all of McGregor's old files, the physical ones, the ones I'd stored in my basement. I've been going through them, page by page, and I found it, tucked inside a real estate file. It's the last note he ever wrote. He emailed me a scan. It was not a diary entry. It was a handwritten note on a legal pad, dated the day before his car accident. Elliot, it read, if you are reading this, V made good on his threat. He was in my office today. He didn't just threaten my family. He threatened Harlan directly. He told Harlan that if Harlan didn't tear up the new will and sign the old one, he would personally and publicly ruin Ava. He said he'd plant stories, call in favors, and ensure she never worked in this town again. He called her unstable and said he could prove it. Harlan refused. He threw him out. Victor's last words were, "You've just signed both your death warrants." Elliot, I'm scared. I'm putting this in the Johnson file. If something happens, tell Ava. Tell her he protected her. I sat there, the scanned image blurring through my tears. He had been protecting me from the very beginning. The next day, I skipped the meetings. I drove to the cemetery. It was a cold, clear afternoon. I bought a bouquet of white lilies, his favorite. I stood in front of the simple granite stone, Harlan Merrick, beloved father and grandfather. I took his letter from my pocket, the one from the safe. I had read it once, quickly, in the chaos of the raid. Now, I read it for what it was, a final conversation. My dearest Ava, it began. If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and they have chosen greed over family. I am sorry. I am sorry I brought these people into your life. But I am not sorry I trusted you. He wrote about my mother. He wrote about his pride in my work. And then, the last paragraph. If this letter stands before you, in that safe, it means you have been forced to shoulder more than one man's share of our family's burden. I am sorry for that. But I knew you were the only one strong enough. They will offer you money. They will offer you comfort. They will try to buy your silence. Do not take it. Your integrity is the key. It was always the key. Your name is your legacy, not mine. Do not let them tarnish it. I folded the letter. I put the flowers down. I finally understood. When I got back to my apartment, Kara was waiting. They blinked, she said. What? The Whitlock lawyers. They sent an offer. It's staggering. Ava, full restoration of your $470,000, with interest, full restoration of all Merrick assets to your control, and an additional $20 million in damages, a private settlement. All you have to do is drop the civil suit and sign a statement petitioning for leniency in the criminal case, citing family stress and misunderstanding. She watched me. She knew what my answer would be. No, I said. Ava, it's everything you... No, I said again, my voice clear and hard. It is not a misunderstanding. It's not family stress. It's a crime. They don't get to buy their way out of this. They don't get to keep their names. My grandfather's name and my name are not for sale. We are not settling. We are not negotiating. I looked out the window, at the city my grandfather had helped build. I want to see them in a courtroom, I said. I want the truth on the public record, every last, ugly word of it. I want to clarify his will, and I want to restore his name. The first day of the civil trial was a masterclass in theatrical misdirection. The criminal trial was pending, waiting on the grand jury. But this civil case, my petition to invalidate the forged will and restore the real one, was the main event. This was where the truth would be decided. The courtroom was packed. Every seat was taken. The press was crammed into the jury box, which was empty. As this was a bench trial, Judge Estevez would be the sole decider of the facts. The Whitlock defense, led by a silver-haired shark named Harrison Cale, went first. Their strategy was exactly what Lydia had previewed at the lodge, not to dispute the facts, but to destroy the witness, me. The defense calls Dr. Evelyn Reed, Cale announced. A woman with severely parted hair and a joyless expression took the stand, a family therapist who had done a single consultation with the Whitlocks a decade ago. Dr. Reed, Cale began, his voice like warm honey. Could you describe your assessment of Miss Merrick at that time? My assessment, the doctor said, reading from her notes, was of a young woman exhibiting classic signs of emotional dysregulation and impulsivity. She was prone to fits of anger, had a persecution complex, and displayed significant paranoid ideation, particularly regarding her role within the family structure. I wrote persecution complex on my legal pad. I did not look up. I focused on the grain of the wood table, on the perfectly sharpened pencil in my hand. I was not a person. I was a forensic accountant, observing data. And in your professional opinion, Doctor, Cale continued, could such a person, under stress, be prone to, shall we say, fabricating elaborate fantasies to explain their own failures? Objection! Kara was on her feet. Speculation. The witness is not a mind reader. Sustained, Judge Estevez said, her voice dry. Move along, Mr. Cale. They called 2 more witnesses just like her, a former family friend who described me as high-strung and ungrateful, a disgruntled former employee I had disciplined for expense fraud, who now claimed I was erratic and difficult. It was a parade of character assassination. I kept writing, high-strung, ungrateful, erratic. Each word was a small, precise incision. I did not flinch. Then they called Brent. He walked to the stand like a man heading to his own execution, but determined to be brave. He wore a quiet, dark suit, no flash. He looked humble. He looked, for the first time in his life, serious. Mr. Whitlock, Cale said, his voice dropping to a sympathetic hush. Tell the court what this has been like for you. Brent looked at the judge. He took a deep, shuddering breath. It's been a nightmare. I loved my grandfather. I love Ava. We all did. He paused, and I watched, fascinated, as his eyes actually welled with tears. It was an incredible performance. He had summoned moisture. My grandfather, Brent continued, his voice thick. He was a strong man, a brilliant man, but in the end, he was confused. He was old. He was not himself. My father. We were just trying to protect him, to protect his legacy. Protect it from what? From instability, Brent said, finally looking at me. His eyes were full of a beautifully crafted sorrow. Ava, she's brilliant, but she's impulsive. She doesn't understand the long view. She would have sold off assets, destroyed everything he built. We just wanted to keep the legacy intact, the way he always wanted it. The will he signed in 2002 was his true wish. We were just honoring his true wish. He swiped at his eye. And for that, she's trying to destroy us. She's calling us criminals. I just don't understand. He broke down, a quiet, dignified sob, a man crushed by the burden of legacy and the betrayal of a stepsister he had only ever tried to help. The press was eating it up. I could hear the scribbling of pens, the soft tapping of keys. I wrote on my pad, Summoned moisture, honoring true wish. Next came Lydia. She glided to the stand. The picture of suffering grace. Her pearls were demure. Her face was pale, her eyes etched with a mother's pain. Mrs. Whitlock, Cale said, what was your relationship with Ava Merrick? Lydia's voice was soft, barely audible. She was my daughter, in all the ways that mattered. I loved her. When her mother passed, I tried so hard to fill that space. And yet, she has accused you of this terrible conspiracy. Lydia looked at me. There were no tears, just a deep, profound, and utterly false ocean of sorrow. We only ever wanted what was best for Ava. We knew she was fragile. We knew she struggled with her place in the world. When she failed in the business, we tried to give her a soft landing, a stipend, a home. We thought we were protecting her. Protecting her from what, Mrs. Whitlock? From herself, Lydia whispered. She was unstable. She was making wild accusations. We were so afraid for her. This lawsuit, it isn't Ava. It's her illness. It's her instability. We just want her to get help. We just want our daughter back. The performance was flawless. She was not a thief. She was a mother, heartbroken, reaching out to a sick child who was accusing her of terrible things. In that moment, in the court of public opinion, I was not the victim. I was the monster. Finally, Victor. He took the stand not as a grieving father, but as the chairman. He was all calm, rational explanation. Mr. Whitlock, why did you file the 2002 will? Victor steepled his fingers. He looked directly at Judge Estevez, man to man, or rather, executive to executive. Judge, he said, you have to understand, I was not just a son-in-law. I was the steward of a complex, multi-generational enterprise. Harlan was failing. His mind was going. He was being influenced by this girl who, while bright, was dangerously impulsive. So you made a decision, Cale prompted. I made a business decision, Victor corrected him. I was forced to. The company, the legacy, the livelihoods of hundreds of employees were at stake. I took the last valid will, the one he signed when he was in full command of his faculties, and I filed it. Was it a perfect solution? No, but I was operating under duress. I was trying to save the company. I did what I had to do, for the good of the family, for the good of the legacy. He was not a conspirator. He was a tactician, a burdened leader forced to make a hard choice. He was the hero of his own story. The day ended. Cale gave a brief, triumphant statement to the press on the courthouse steps. "Today," he said, "you heard the truth. You heard from a family torn apart, not by greed, but by a desperate, tragic attempt to protect a beloved, unstable daughter from herself." The 6 o'clock news ran with it. The online comments were a cesspool. "She sounds crazy, greedy. They should have had her committed. That poor mother." I walked out of the courthouse with Kara and Maya, a phalanx of cameras in my face, and I said nothing. I kept my expression neutral. I kept my head high. I got in the car. On the ride back, Maya looked over at me. "You okay, Ava? That was brutal." "I'm fine," I said. "It was exactly what we expected." "Their narrative is strong," Kara said, staring out the window. "The unstable, greedy daughter versus the burdened, loving family. It plays—" "It's a good story," I agreed. "But it's not the truth. They're just telling stories. Tomorrow, we bring the facts." Back in my apartment, I shut the door. The silence was absolute. I leaned against the new steel core, and for 1 second, I let the mask drop. I let the sting of Lydia's words, illness, fragile, unstable, land. I let the image of Brent's crocodile tears burn. They were trying to erase me, to reduce my entire life, my skill, my mind, to a single, dismissible word: crazy. I stood there for a full minute, then I pushed off the door. I went to my kitchen. I made a protein shake. I set my alarm for 4 hours. I lay down on my bed, fully clothed, and went to sleep. I did not dream. When the alarm went off, it was just after midnight. I got up. I went into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at the woman in the mirror. My eyes were tired, but they were clear. "Tomorrow," I whispered to my reflection. "Tomorrow. The truth gets its turn." I walked back into my bedroom. I opened my closet. I pulled out the suit I had bought for this, a dark, sharp, cobalt blue. It was not a color of mourning or of victimhood. It was the color of armor, the color of a clear sky after a storm. I laid it out on the bed, the jacket, the pants, the simple white silk shell. In the living room, I could hear the muted sound of Kara and Maya, who were in my spare room, their voices a low murmur as they went over the timeline one last time. They were rearranging the order of witnesses. They were confirming the surprise had been subpoenaed and was secure. They were preparing the sledgehammer. I looked at the blue suit. Tomorrow. They would not be cross-examining an unstable daughter. They would be facing a forensic accountant. And I was bringing my receipts. Day 2, I wore the blue suit. When I walked into the courtroom, the atmosphere had changed. The confidence on the Whitlock side of the aisle was thick, almost smug. They had won the narrative. They had painted me as the hysterical daughter, and now they were waiting for the judge to pat me on the head and send me away. Harrison Cale, their lead lawyer, gave me a small, pitying smile as I passed. I sat down. Kara and Maya flanked me. They were not smiling. They were coiled. "All rise," the bailiff called. Judge Estevez entered and sat. "Ms. Dominguez, you may call your first witness." Kara stood. Her voice was flat, cold, and clear. "Your Honor, the plaintiff calls myself. I petition the court to allow me to present, as an officer of the court and as a forensic specialist, the evidentiary timeline we have assembled. This is a technical presentation, not a narrative." Cale was on his feet in an instant. "Objection. This is unprecedented. Counsel cannot be a witness. She is an advocate." Judge Estevez looked at him over her glasses. "Mr. Cale, this is a bench trial. I am the finder of fact. I am not a jury that can be swayed by theatrics. I want to see the evidence. And if Ms. Dominguez, as an ex-DOJ attorney with a specialty in financial forensics, is the best person to present that data, then I want to hear it. Objection overruled. Proceed. Ms. Dominguez." Kara nodded. She walked to the podium and the large screen set up for the presentation. "Thank you. Your Honor, I will be presenting the case in 8 parts. Let's begin. The lights in the courtroom dimmed slightly. The screen came to life. Exhibit A, Kara said, an audio file, recovered from my client's personal digital recorder. The date is October 24th. The location, confirmed by metadata and the content of the recording, is the Granite Lodge in Sunapee, New Hampshire. She clicked a button. The courtroom filled with the sound of a crackling fire, the clink of a glass, and then Brent's voice, casual, arrogant. McGregor? God, are you still on that? That old fool? Dad already handled that lawyer. I watched the defense table. Victor went rigid. Lydia, who was lifting a glass of water to her lips, stopped, her hand trembling, and Brent, the color drained from his face, leaving a sick, pale greenish tint. He looked at his lawyer, Cale, his eyes wide with panic. A murmur went through the press gallery. What? Kara did not pause to let it sink in. She was a machine. Exhibit B, a video deposition from Mrs. Doyle, the Whitlock family's housekeeper for over 20 years. She was located in Vermont, where she had fled after being intimidated by the defendants. Cale objected. Hearsay, intimidation, there is no proof. It is a sworn affidavit, Mr. Cale, the judge snapped, and the intimidation is part of the criminal complaint. Sit down. Play the video. Mrs. Doyle's face appeared, large and clear. She was terrified, but her voice was firm. Kara's voice, off-screen, asked, Mrs. Doyle, you said you were there when Harlan Merrick signed his final will, the one with the blue cover. Yes, Mrs. Doyle whispered. He called me in. He said, Doyle, you are my witness. This is Ava's part, to make sure she is safe. He signed it. Mr. McGregor signed it. I signed it. Who else was in the room? Mrs. Whitlock, Lydia. Where was she? She was standing right behind Mr. Harlan's chair, just watching his hand. She looked angry. I looked at Lydia. The mask of the grieving mother was gone. Her face was marble. She was no longer a victim. She was an overseer. Exhibit C, Kara continued, relentless. The forensic document examiner's report. The screen split. On one side, the signature from the 2002 property deed, the one my grandfather had co-signed for my mother. On the other, the signature from the probated will, the one that gave everything to Brent. They were identical. As the examiner's report states, Kara said, these are not just similar. They are a pixel for pixel, congruent match. It is a digital reproduction, a forgery. Then, Kara overlaid a third signature, the one from Harlan's journal, found in the safe. This, Kara said, her voice sharp, is the real signature. Note the kinetic tremor. Note the pen pressure at the end of the K. Note the life in the line. The probated will is a ghost. The journal is the man. Cale was on his feet, shouting, This is a circus, a light show. We dispute this expert. Then you will have your chance in rebuttal. Mr. Cale, Judge Estevez said, her eyes glued to the screen. For now, I am finding this circus very illuminating. Proceed. Kara clicked to the next slide. Exhibit D, the audio file recovered from the SD card in Harlan Merrick's wall safe. The recording of the Shoreline Club family meeting. The voice you are about to hear belongs to the deceased. My grandfather's voice filled the courtroom. It was strong, vital, and furious. And I will say this only once, so I suggest you listen. This merger was a mistake. Your operations are sloppy. Victor, and your son is a liability. Victor flinched as if he had been struck. The Merrick assets. You will manage them. You will be stewards, but you will not own them. They will be held in trust. Lydia's voice, sharp and cold. In trust for who? And Harlan's voice, ringing with absolute clarity. For Ava. She is the heir. But there is a condition. She must prove her integrity. I am betting on her. I am betting on my blood. A wave of sound went through the courtroom. Not a word, but a collective, audible gasp. The press was scribbling furiously. Yesterday, I was a gold digger. Today, I was the chosen heir. Kara did not let the emotional beat land. She went straight back to the numbers. Yesterday, the defense painted my client as unstable and a failure in the business. Let's look at that failure. Exhibit E, bank records. A wire transfer of $470,000 from Ms. Ava Merrick's personal trust account to the Whitlock Group, dated April 7th, 2017. The bank statement filled the screen. The number was circled in red. And Exhibit F, an internal memorandum from the Whitlock Group, dated July 14th, 2017, 3 months later. It is a memo from Victor Whitlock's executive assistant, circulated to the board. I watched Victor's face as the memo he thought he had buried appeared. It reads, Kara said, per VW and BW, we are to handle the separation of A. Merrick, offer $5,000 severance, reclassify capital contribution as consulting fee, file NDA. And finally, Kara said, Exhibit G, Ms. Merrick's termination letter, dated July 15th, 2017, the day after they reclassified her $470,000 investment as a fee. The room was processing it. I had not been fired for instability. I had been fired so my investment could be stolen. But the board agreed, Cale sputtered, rising slightly from his chair. The board approved her separation. About that, Maya Gold said, standing up for the first time. Your Honor, we have new evidence. 2 members of the Whitlock board, who provided affidavits for the defense yesterday, have reconsidered their testimony after seeing this evidence last night. What? Cale looked genuinely stunned. They have filed new, superseding affidavits with the court this morning, Maya said. They both now state, under penalty of perjury, that they were lied to, that they were told by Victor Whitlock that the $470,000 was a severance payment to me, not an investment from me. They were told I was being let go for instability. They were victims of the same fraud. This was the kill shot. The Whitlock's own allies were turning on them. Kara stepped back up, which brings us to the fraud itself. How did they do it? How did they plan to make the assets disappear, even from themselves? She put up a new slide, a complex flowchart. Exhibit H, the SPV, or Special Purpose Vehicle, model, as established by the documents found in the safe and corroborated by Delaware state filings. She traced the lines with a laser pointer. 1. The estate, containing all Merrick assets, is probated under the fraudulent will, giving Victor control. 2. Victor immediately transfers all real property and liquid assets into these 3 shell companies. 3. These shell companies, managed by Victor, then begin to liquidate the assets. And where did that money go? Kara asked. She clicked. Exhibit Y, bank reports for North Shore Urban Partners, one of the shell companies, and corresponding statements for a holding company owned by Mr. Brent Whitlock. She showed the dates, a transfer of $500,000 from the shell. The next day, a consulting fee for $200,000 paid to Brent's company. Another transfer, another fee. They were not protecting a legacy, Kara said, her voice ringing with contempt. They were running a chop shop. They were liquidating Harlan Merrick's life's work and paying themselves consulting fees with the proceeds. This was not a family misunderstanding. This was a criminal conspiracy. The courtroom was utterly, devastatingly silent. The narrative of the unstable daughter had not just been defeated. It had been atomized. All the drama, all the tears from Lydia and Brent yesterday. It was all revealed as a calculated, cynical performance. This was the truth. This was the math. Harrison Cale looked gray. His pitying smile was gone, replaced by a mask of cold panic. He leaned over to Victor, hissing. Victor looked stunned, as if he could not believe the numbers were on the screen. Lydia was staring straight ahead, her eyes dead. Brent looked like he was going to be physically ill. Cale stood, his voice unsteady. Your Honor, given the The sheer volume of this new technical data, the defense requests a brief recess, a 20-minute recess, to confer with our clients. Judge Estevez looked down from the bench. Her face was granite. She looked at the evidence, then at Cale. "Mr. Cale," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You had all day yesterday to tell your stories. Today, the evidence gets its turn." She looked at Kara. "Motion denied. Proceed. Ms. Dominguez." The denial of the recess hung in the air. A final, slamming door. Harrison Cale, a man paid millions to talk, had nothing left to say. He sat down, his face the color of old parchment. Kara took her seat. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was no longer a trial. It was a sentencing. I watched them. I watched the family that had tried to erase me. Lydia was the first to break. Her suffering mother mask had not just cracked, it had dissolved. She was staring at the flowchart on the screen, the one that showed the shell companies, the one that showed the theft. Her face was a rigid, bone-white mask of pure, undiluted rage. Her hands were in her lap, and she was gripping her pearl necklace. She was gripping it so tightly that the veins stood out on the back of her hands, and her knuckles were white, matching the pearls. I heard a soft snap. A single pearl, loosed from its string, fell into her lap. She did not notice. Victor, beside her, was trying to rally. He saw his world ending. He leaned past his lawyer and spoke, his voice hoarse, appealing directly to the judge. "Your Honor, Judge Estevez, you must understand, this is a matter of family, of honor. What I did, what we did, it was to protect the family name, the Whitlock name, the legacy. This public, it dishonors everything my father-in-law built." Judge Estevez looked down at him from the bench. She took off her glasses. Her eyes were not angry, they were cold, like a winter sky. "Mr. Whitlock," she said, her voice cutting through the silence, "I have sat here for 2 days and listened to you speak of legacy and honor, yet the evidence I have seen, evidence you systematically tried to hide, is of forgery, of perjury, of theft, of conspiracy, of the intimidation of an old man. You speak of honor." She leaned forward. "Tell me, Mr. Whitlock, what honor is there in a forgery? What legacy is built on a lie?" Victor recoiled, physically, as if she had slapped him. He had no answer. He sank back into his chair. A deflated, old man in an expensive suit, finally, totally silenced. And Brent, I looked at my half-brother, the man who had laughed. He was not looking at the judge. He was not looking at his parents. He was staring at the floor. His hands were clasped between his knees, and he was rocking. A tiny, almost imperceptible movement. He was the picture of a spoiled child who had finally, after 36 years, been told no, in a way that he could not buy or smirk his way out of. He would not look at me. He could not. The man who had laughed in my face could not even meet my eyes. Kara stood for the final word. "Your Honor, we have one final piece of testimony. We call Elliot Crane." Cale just waved his hand, a gesture of complete defeat. "No objection." Elliot walked to the stand. He was no longer the trembling man in the diner. He looked old. Yes, but he stood straight. He took the oath. Kara was gentle. "Mr. Crane, you provided the plaintiff with an audio diary from the late Mr. McGregor, but you also found one last note, a handwritten note." "Yes, ma'am," Elliot said. "Could you please read the final lines of that note, the one Mr. McGregor wrote the day before he died, into the record?" Elliot put on his glasses. He unfolded the scanned copy. His voice was steady, and it filled the courtroom. "He wrote," Elliot read, "Victor's last words were, 'You've just signed both your death warrants.' Elliot, I'm scared. I'm putting this in the Johnson file. If something happens, tell Ava. Tell her he protected her." He paused, and then read the last 5-word sentence. If I disappear, find Ava Merrick. Elliot took off his glasses. Harlan and McGregor, they knew. They knew she was the only one who could fix this. I did not feel a rush of triumph. I did not feel joy. I felt a sudden, sharp, and overwhelming memory. I was 23 years old. I was standing in the dining room, the sting of Lydia's slap blooming on my cheek, the shock of it, the humiliation. But that was not the memory. The memory was the sound, the sharp, barking laugh from my brother. In that moment, I realized why I had pushed this all the way. It was not the $470,000. It was not even the inheritance or the house. It was that laugh. It was the sound of my humanity being dismissed, the sound of me being turned into a punchline, the sound of my pain being a source of amusement. That laugh was the engine of this whole trial, and I had just silenced it forever. Judge Estevez cleared her throat. She looked at her notes. She looked at the defense table. She looked at me. I have heard 2 days of testimony, she began. Yesterday, I heard a story of a loving family, a burdened patriarch, and an unstable daughter. It was a compelling narrative. Today, she continued, I saw the facts. I saw bank transfers, forged documents, audio recordings, witness intimidation, and a clear criminal conspiracy to defraud an heir and the court. The story, it seems, was a fiction designed to cover a crime. She looked at Victor, Lydia, and Brent, one by one. This is not an internal family dispute. This is not a misunderstanding. This is a pattern of deliberate criminal behavior, motivated by greed, and executed with a shocking degree of malice. The actions taken by Victor Whitlock, Lydia Whitlock, and Brent Whitlock were not to protect a legacy, they were to steal one. Her voice was final. Therefore, in the civil matter of Merrick versus Whitlock, I rule as follows. 1. The probated will, dated 2002, is found to be a forgery and is hereby declared void and invalid. 2. The true last will and testament of Harlan Merrick, as recovered from his personal safe and authenticated by this court, is declared to be the binding legal document. 3. All assets, properties, and accounts listed in said will are to be immediately restored, full management and control of the Merrick Legacy Trust, and all associated assets are to be transferred to the sole named beneficiary, Ms. Ava Merrick. I breathed out. It was done. Furthermore, the judge continued, her voice hardening, this court cannot and will not ignore the overwhelming evidence of criminal action. I am referring this entire file, every transcript, every exhibit, and my own findings, to the Office of the United States Attorney for immediate criminal prosecution. This court is adjourned. The gavel cracked, loud as a gunshot. It was over. The room exploded. Reporters were shouting, running for the doors. Lydia was sitting, frozen, staring into space. Victor was slumped over, his head in his hands. Kara and Maya were both hugging me. I was just still. I let them guide me out, through a side door, into the hallway, which was its own kind of chaos. We were heading for the elevators when I heard my name. Ava! I turned. Brent. He had run out after me. His face was blotchy, red, his eyes wild with a terror I had never seen. He looked like a cornered animal. He grabbed my arm. Ava, you cannot do this. You destroyed us. You destroyed everything. The family, the name, everything is gone. You ruined it. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had laughed. He still did not get it. He still thought this was something I had done to him. I pulled my arm free from his grasp. My voice was quiet. It was cold. It was the last thing I would ever say to him. No, Brent, I did not destroy anything. You, Lydia, and Victor, you just ran out of things to steal. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the hallway. By the time I got home, the media landscape had been rewritten. The 6 o'clock news led with my face, but the caption was different. Heiress wins, court rules. Whitlock will a forgery. The online headlines were even more stark. From gold digger to whistleblower, Ava Merrick exposes criminal enterprise in Boston's elite. Judge refers Whitlocks for criminal prosecution citing malice and greed. The narrative Lydia had spent a decade building had been wiped out in a single afternoon of hard, cold facts. I stood in my apartment. The silence was deafening. It was done. I had won. I had my grandfather's name back. I had my name back. And I had an empire. The assets restored to me were staggering. More money than I could ever spend. I thought about Harlan's letter. It is not a gift. It is a responsibility. Your integrity is the key. I thought about Mr. McGregor and Elliot and Mrs. Doyle, people with no power, who told the truth anyway, at great personal risk. I knew what I had to do. The money was not the point. It was the tool. I picked up my phone. I called Kara. Kara, I said, I need you to file some more paperwork for me. Ava, can it wait? I'm drinking champagne. It's about the money, I said. I'm not keeping it, not most of it. I want to start a foundation, a pro bono legal fund, for people who need to fight families like mine, for people who need to expose fraud, no matter how powerful, for people who need to buy their own integrity a voice. There was a silence on the other end. A foundation, Kara said, her voice soft. What are you going to call it? I looked at the copy of my grandfather's letter, sitting on my desk. The Harlan Integrity Fund, I said. The legacy starts now. 1 month later, I called the last family meeting. I did not summon them to Beacon Hill or to Sunapee. Their homes were no longer theirs. They were pending the final transfer of assets, mine, and I was liquidating them. The criminal trials were set. Their assets were frozen. They were out on bail. Pariahs in the city they had once ruled. I booked the private dining room at the Shoreline Club in Marblehead. The same room, the one where my grandfather's voice had been recorded, where he had laid his trap. They came. They had no choice. Their lawyers had probably advised it, hoping for some last-minute appeal to my mercy before their sentencing. I was there first. I sat at the head of the long, polished mahogany table, the same seat Harlan had occupied. The room overlooked the bay, the water gray and cold under a December sky. I did not order them food. I did not offer them drinks. I had placed 3 items on the table in front of me. 1. A certified copy of Harlan's true will. 2. Harlan's leather-bound journal. 3. The newly filed, state-approved articles of incorporation for the Harlan Integrity Fund. They filed in, one by one. Victor, thinner, his suit hanging on him. Lydia, her pearls gone, her hair a simple, severe cut. She wore no makeup. The mask was finally, fully gone. She just looked like a tired, angry woman. And Brent, his arrogance was gone. He was hollowed out, his eyes darting, unable to meet mine. They sat at the far end of the table. Thank you for coming, I said. My voice was neutral, clear. It carried in the quiet room. Why are we here, Ava? Victor's voice was a rasp. To gloat? I am here to establish the new rules, I said. I pushed the 3 items, one by one, down the table until they rested in the center. This is the will my grandfather signed. This is the journal he kept, detailing your coercion. And this is the new legacy. I tapped the articles of incorporation. The assets you tried to steal are now the seed capital for this fund. It will provide pro bono legal services for victims of financial fraud, elder abuse, and probate theft. Its first headquarters will be the Beacon Hill House. Once it is sold, Lydia made a small, choking sound. The Whitlock name, I continued, is no longer a shield. It is no longer a passkey to galas and board seats. From now on, it will be a case study. It will be a reminder, taught in law schools, of what happens when greed overcomes responsibility. Lydia stood up. Her voice was thin, desperate, trying one last time for a connection that had never existed. Ava, please, this is a family matter. Cannot we talk? Privately? Just us. We can We can find a way to heal. We can reconcile. I looked at her, the woman who had slapped me, the woman who had called me unstable. Lydia, I said, and her name felt like a foreign object in my mouth. We are not healing, and we are not reconciling. There is a difference between forgiveness and reunion. I may one day find a way to forgive you for what you did, but I will never, ever be in a room with you again. This is about boundaries. You do not exist in my life anymore. This meeting is your formal notice. Her face crumpled. She understood. This was not a negotiation. It was an execution. Victor, watching her, seemed to finally understand. He looked down at his hands. He was wearing the watch, Harlan's Patek Philippe, the watch he had worn by the fireplace in Sunapee, the one he had worn to the trial. Slowly, his fingers fumbled with the clasp. He undid it, the heavy gold watch, my grandfather's watch, slid from his wrist. He looked at it for a long moment. Then, with a sigh that seemed to drain the last of the fight from him, he placed it on the table and pushed it, very slowly, toward me. I went too far, he whispered. It was not an apology. It was a statement of fact, a concession. He was a better man than me. I see that now. I did not take the watch. I just left it there, between us. Brent, who had been silent, finally spoke. His voice was raw. Ava, the fund, the charity, I want to work for it. I can do good. I can volunteer. I can make amends. He was begging for a way back, begging for the Whitlock name to be associated with good again, with him attached. I looked at him, at the man who had laughed. No, I said, you will not work for my fund. You will not have your name on it. But if you want to make amends, there is a community legal aid center in Roxbury. They are underfunded and they need help processing intake forms. They need someone to file papers, anonymously, without status, without your name on a plaque. You can start there. Or you can do nothing. It does not matter to me. I stood up. The criminal trial will proceed. My testimony will be factual. After that, I never want to see any of you again. I turned, and for the last time, I walked away from them. I did not go back to the office. I drove to Marblehead, to the public landing overlooking the bay, the same view as the room. But now I was in the cold, clean air. I pulled the letter from my pocket. Harlan's letter. I read the last line again, the line I had memorized. Legacy isn't inherited, it's earned. I earned this, grandfather. I thought I earned it. I pulled out my phone and dialed Kara. She picked up on the first ring. It's done, I said. How do you feel? Quiet, I said. And ready? Let's start on the loan shark victim files next week. The ones the AG's office ignored. I want to see their books. I love that, Kara laughed. You get given an empire, and you just want to do more audits. It's the only way I know how to build, I said. The epilogue is this. I still work. The Harlan Integrity Fund is my full-time job. We are a team of 10 now, and we are a terror to every shady executor and abusive guardian in the state. I also teach, once a week, at New England Law. I teach a guest seminar on forensic accounting and probate fraud. I am in the lecture hall now. The board behind me is covered in the Whitlock SPV flowchart, the one Kara had used in court. It is a perfect, beautiful diagram of greed. I write 3 words on the board. Integrity builds legacy. A young woman in the 3rd row, her hand raised high, asks the question I always get. Ms. Merrick, after everything you went through, the press, your family, the trial, do you have any regrets? I turn from the board. I look at her. I look at all of them, these young, smart faces, waiting for an answer. I smile, a real smile. I have one regret, I say, my voice clear in the quiet hall. I regret that I was silent for so long. I regret that I let a slap and a laugh convince me that I was worthless, even for a day. The rest of it? The fight? That was not a burden. That was a privilege. The rest of it? I am going to tell you the whole story, from the beginning. I pick up the chalk, the laugh. That sharp, barking sound that had been a weapon was a memory. It had no power here. The only sounds in the room are the soft scrape of chalk against the board and the quiet, steady sound of breathing, the sound of a legacy, finally, being built. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let us know in the comments where you are listening from. We would love to connect with you and hear your thoughts. We invite you to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.